Imagine walking into the heart of an abandoned outpost, where silence feels alive. And behind a sealed door, you find not rubble, not machines, but a living dragon bound in chains. His copper eyes glowing with both sorrow and hope. What would you do if the countdown to demolition had already begun? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now let's jump into the story. The demolition timer blinked on the wall like a heartbeat that would not slow down. 39 minutes remained before the abandoned section of Keller Outpost 9 was destroyed. The corridors were empty, but the air carried the taste of rust, dust, and something stranger. Beneath it all lingered a faint smell of sulfur, sharp and unsettling, as if the building itself remembered fire. Mira Santero moved through the shadows with steady steps. She was young, trained as a wildlife ranger, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. She carried a slim override module, an old tool passed down from her mentor, Jace Mullen. The device was worn smooth from years of use. Tonight, it was her only chance to open a sealed door that no one was supposed to touch. The access panel glowed red again, refusing her code. She cursed softly under her breath and pressed the module against it. The old machine hummed to life, filling the silence with a low vibration. Then, with a long metallic sigh, the bolts released. The heavy door shifted, groaning as if protesting its own betrayal. Beyond the threshold stretched a corridor filled with shadows. Dust lined the floor in neat patterns, but in some places, footprints broke the stillness. Someone had walked here not long ago. Plastic wrappers were tucked into corners, signs of recent life in a place declared abandoned. Overhead, tired emergency lights flickered, making the shadows stretch and move like restless spirits. Mira stepped forward carefully. She had come because of a message, an anonymous warning that spoke of a life about to be erased. Demolition crews would arrive soon. Whatever was hidden in this place would vanish forever. She could have ignored it. She almost had. But her instinct told her there was truth in the message, a truth she could not leave buried. As she moved deeper, the air grew heavier, carrying a sound too soft to be machinery. It was the sound of breath, not the sharp hiss of a vent or the hum of a filter, but a ragged exhale filled with weight. It made her stop, made her chest tighten. Something alive was ahead. The passage descended, turning into a reinforced chamber, sealed with transparent panels. Through the thick window, she finally saw what the message had spoken of. The creature lay chained in the center of the room, its body bound by loops of industrial me. It was no ordinary animal. Scales covered its body in shifting shades of deep ocean blue and turquoise. Each movement sent a faint shimmer of light across its skin, as if water and starlight lived inside it. Folded wings were strapped cruelly to its sides, their membranes dull from confinement. But what struck her most were the eyes. They glowed with the color of molten copper, bright, intelligent, and far too aware. They followed her every move, steady and unblinking. She realized in that moment she was not looking at a beast. She was looking at someone. Mira pressed her palm against the cold glass. Her voice dropped into a whisper, meant as much for herself as for him. "You're real." The creature tilted its head slightly, and a strange shiver spread through the room. Then, without the movement of its mouth, a voice entered her mind. It was not loud, it was not harsh. It rolled through her thoughts like thunder, too far away to scare, but close enough to feel. "You are not the keeper of lights," the voice said. "You smell of open wind." Mira's breath caught. The story she had once dismissed came rushing back. Whispers of dragons among miners, dismissed as hallucinations. Yet here, behind glass and steel, was living proof. Her hand trembled against the window. "My name is Mira," she said, her words soft but steady. "I came because someone asked for help." "Are you the one?" The voice pressed gently against her thoughts. "They call me Inventory, but I was once called Halcyon." The name struck her. It was gentle and strong. Nothing like the cruel label stamped into the chains that held him. The timer on the wall continued its countdown. Demolition was coming closer with each passing second. Mira felt the urgency push at her chest. She turned to the control panel, sliding her tool into the lock. Red warnings flashed across the screen, demanding codes and authority she did not have. She ignored them and worked with careful hands. The first barrier gave way, clicking softly. Behind her, the chain dragon shifted, the sound of metal grinding against metal filling the chamber. "They're going to erase this place," she told him as she worked. "You, the chains, everything. I can't let that happen." The voice came again, carrying both sadness and hope. "They said no one would come. They said the dark would keep me." "Well, they were wrong," she said, determination tightening her jaw. The lock released with a sharp chime, and the door hissed open. She stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, she felt the air change. It tingled, charged, as though lightning were waiting in the walls. The dragon's presence filled the room, powerful and overwhelming, yet not threatening. She moved closer, her hands visible, her posture calm. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help." The dragon studied her, nostrils flaring slightly, as if tasting the truth in her scent. Then his voice brushed her thoughts once more. "If you free me, I will remember your name." The promise was simple. It was also enough. Mira set down her pack, pulled out her tools, and knelt beside the first chain. The demolition timer ticked on. The air grew heavier. Somewhere above them, the station prepared to collapse. But in that small chamber, between a determined young woman and a bound stardrake, something new had already begun. The sound of chains falling echoed through the chamber like a storm breaking far away. Halcyon's first free limb stretched forward, claws scraping against the stone floor. The dragon stared at his foot as though he had forgotten what it felt like to move without iron weighing him down. Mira felt the tremor in her chest, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. Yet the countdown pressed on. Demolition was less than 90 minutes away. Every tick of the timer was a reminder that she had chosen a path with no return. Her hands steady despite the urgency. Sparks flared as her tool bit against the corroded mechanism. "Come on," she whispered. "Don't fail me now." Halcyon lowered his head, copper-bright eyes fixed on her. His voice slipped into her thoughts, quieter than before. "You speak as though fighting with the lock will make it obey." She gave a tight smile. "Sometimes it helps." The lock resisted, stubborn and rusted, but finally gave way with a sharp click. Another coil of chains slid loose, clattering to the floor. Halcyon flexed again, the movement more certain this time. The air seemed to lighten as his body remembered freedom. Above them, footsteps echoed faintly through the corridors. They were not alone. Security teams had noticed the breach. Every second became sharper, heavier. Mira worked faster. The third lock was different, newer, more complex, with a biometric reader fused to its side. She hissed under her breath. "This one won't open with picks. It needs power." Halcyon tilted his head, thinking. One with silver hair touched that lock each time he came. He is gone now. They said the project was finished. That is why they will bring fire to this place. Mira studied the lock. Power meant weakness. If it relied on circuits, she could break those circuits. She pulled an electromagnetic pulse puck from her pack. It was small, designed for emergencies only. She thumbed the switch and looked at Halcyon. "This may hurt, but it's the only way." "Do it," he replied simply. She triggered the pulse. The chamber plunged into total darkness as the systems died with a sigh. Then something extraordinary happened. Halcyon's scales began to glow, soft blue light rising from deep within him. The glow washed across the walls, turning the room into an ocean cave lit from within. Mira froze in awe, then grinned despite herself. "Useful trick," she murmured. The dead biometric reader gave up its hold, and the third lock fell open. Now only 3 remain. They were the largest, binding his wings and neck. Mira touched one of them and felt the heat of old energy coursing through its surface. "These won't open in time," she whispered. "We need another way." Halcyon's chest rose and fell. "I can cut them, but I fear the fire will burn you as well." She stepped closer, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I trust you. Be precise." For a long breath, they studied each other. Then Halcyon reared back, his throat glowing like a forge. With terrifying grace, he released a narrow stream of white-hot plasma. It sliced through the locks one by one, each metal cuff glowing red before melting into dripping fragments. The heat was overwhelming, but Halcyon curved his body around her, shielding her from the worst of it. In less than a minute, the last of the chains hit the ground. Halcyon stood taller now, wings stretching partway open. The membranes shimmered like starlight caught in crystal. The chamber, once heavy with despair, now free. His copper eyes burned with joy so raw it made Mira's throat tighten. But the moment did not last. Heavy boots pounded down the corridor. Voices shouted, growing clearer. The demolition crew had been replaced with armed guards. The door burst open, and 5 figures stormed in. Weapons glinted in the glow of Halcyon's scales. The lead guard raised his voice, hard and sharp. "Step away from the specimen." Mira turned on him instantly, standing in front of Halcyon without hesitation. "He's not a specimen. He's a sentient being, and what you're doing here is illegal under colonial law." The guard sneered. "Lady, I don't care what the law says. We have orders. That thing doesn't leave this facility alive." Halcyon growled low in his chest, the sound vibrating through the floor. The guards tightened their grips. Mira lifted her arms wide. "Then you'll have to shoot me first." The room hung in silence for one long second. Then the lead guard's finger twitched on the trigger. Before the shot came, Halcyon's body released a surge of energy. It was not fire. It was not plasma. It was something deeper, a wave of magnetism that filled the chamber with invisible force. Weapons jerked out of hands, armor buckled, and the guards were thrown against the walls as if struck by a storm. Their rifles twisted into warped shapes. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of metal skittering across the floor. Mira stared at the scene, stunned. "You didn't even touch them." "Dragons carry storms within," Halcyon replied, calm as the glow around him dimmed. "It is part of how we survived." Mira wasted no time. She ran to Halcyon's side and climbed onto his back, gripping the natural ridges between his scales. "We have to go now. They'll send more." "Hold tight," he said. With a single powerful leap, Halcyon smashed through the ceiling above them. Metal tore like paper. They surged upward, through one level, then another. Each beat of his wings carried them closer to open air. Mira's heart raced, adrenaline pounding. But beneath it was something stronger: trust. The chains had fallen. The promise was alive. And together, they were not running anymore. They were rising. Europa appeared through the shuttle's viewport, like a frozen jewel, drifting in the black sea of space. Its surface stretched endless and pale, a sheet of cracked ice, glowing under faint sunlight. Below that ice lay oceans deeper than any on Earth, and on the surface, domes of light glimmered where humanity had built its fragile refuge. Mira guided the shuttle toward docking beacons, her hands steady despite exhaustion. Every muscle ached, but her mind was alive with one thought: safety for Halcyon. Beside her in the cargo bay, the young star drake shifted, his scales glowing faintly, a living reminder of everything she had risked to save. The landing cradle embraced the ship with a dull clang. Air hissed through pipes as pressure equalized. When the hatch opened, a rush of warm, filtered oxygen wrapped around them. This was the Europa Sanctuary, a place built to house endangered life from across the solar system. Here, fragile species from crumbling habitats were given a second chance. But today, it would hold something no one had ever expected to see alive. Dr. Alistair Penfield stood waiting on the docking platform, tall, thin, with white hair that curled around his weathered face. He looked less like a scientist and more like a tired sailor who had charted too many storms. Yet his eyes lit with quiet wonder when Halcyon stepped onto the platform. "All my life, I searched for proof," Penfield whispered. "Today, proof walks into my care." Mira nodded, her voice steady but soft. "This is Halcyon. He's not a legend. He's real, and he's been chained for 3 years." The old scientist's gaze softened as he looked at the dragon. He bowed his head, not as a researcher, but as a man offering respect. "Welcome, Halcyon. No chains will touch you here." Halcyon lowered his head, copper eyes shining. His thoughts pressed gently into the room. "Thank you, Keeper of Ice. I wish to trust this promise." Penfield did not flinch at the voice. Instead, he smiled. "Then let us show you the sky we've built." They guided Halcyon into the largest dome of the sanctuary. Inside, the air was warmer, rich with the scent of living soil. Towering artificial trees spread branches overhead, and wide stretches of green opened beneath a ceiling that mimicked sunlight. Creatures of many shapes and sizes wandered the dome. Feathered grazers, winged birds of glass-like skin, and mammals rescued from broken colonies. But the dome fell silent when Halcyon spread his wings for the first time in freedom. Light passed through the membranes, scattering across the sanctuary like rays through crystal water. He lifted from the ground with a slow beat of his wings. Gasps rose from workers and children alike. They had seen animals fly before, but never something that carried both majesty and intelligence so openly. Mira watched with pride. "He belongs here," she said quietly. Penfield nodded. "Yes, but not without danger. Word'll spread quickly. Not everyone will want him free." His words proved true sooner than expected. Within hours, the sanctuary's defense systems reported unknown ships holding position in orbit. They were not government vessels. They belonged to the same shadowed network that had kept Halcyon chained. Their transmissions spoke in the cold language of ownership. They called Halcyon an asset, a specimen, property. Penfield gathered Mira, Halcyon, and several trusted workers into a council room overlooking the ice plains. Greta Noon, the chief engineer of the flight dome, tapped nervously at her console. "3 ships, holding steady," she reported, their broadcasting recovery orders, complete with purchase document. Mira's jaw tightened. "You can't own a living being. The colonial charter is clear." Penfield folded his hands, his voice calm but firm. "Charters mean little to men who buy and sell what should never be bought. But we do not answer with anger. We answer with truth." Halcyon shifted, his copper eyes sweeping across the group. "They caught me because I was young and curious. I will not let them catch others the same way. If you wish, I will speak." Mira turned to him, surprised. "You would speak to the colonies? Let them hear your voice?" "Yes," he answered. "Hiding has only brought chains. Perhaps speaking will bring doors instead." Penfield leaned forward. "A broadcast, then. We have the systems. We send not only his words, but his presence. People must see him as more than a myth." Greta grinned, determination lighting her tired face. "Give me an hour, and I'll string the antennas myself." But the shadow ships did not wait an hour. They sent drones instead, sleek machines that slipped past the sanctuary's perimeter. Alarms wailed through the dome. Mira sprinted toward the observation deck, fear hammering in her chest. Outside, 3 drones darted through the dome's upper air, weapons glowing red. Before she could shout a warning, Halcyon surged upward. His wings cut the air with precision, and he released a ripple of energy that shimmered across the sky. The drones froze mid-flight, their circuits burning out. They tumbled like broken toys, crashing harmlessly to the ground. Mira stared in awe. "You've been practicing," she said. Halcyon landed beside her, scales glowing faintly. "I have read your books, Fields and Currents. Faraday was clever. Penfield's voice came through the comms, urgent. The drones were only a distraction. The ships outside are moving closer. They want him back. We cannot fight them with weapons, but we can fight them with truth. Mira placed a hand on Halcyon's warm scales. Then we go live now, before they twist the story into something else. Halcyon lowered his head, his voice deep and steady in her thoughts. Let them see me. Let them know I am not property. I am Halcyon. Penfield looked out at the frozen plains. His eyes carried both hope and fear. Then we show the system that the sanctuary beneath the ice is not a prison. It is a place where chains are broken and voices are finally heard. The decision was made. Within the hour, antennas would hum with power, signals would scatter across space, and Halcyon's story would reach ears that had never believed such beings could exist. Mira knew danger was still close. The shadow ships would not give up easily. But she also knew something had shifted. For the first time, Halcyon was not only free, he was ready to be heard. The broadcast began, not with thunder, but with quiet voices. Cameras set up on the roof of the sanctuary dome showed the endless ice plains of Europa, glowing under faint sunlight. 4 chairs stood in a circle, simple and unthreatening. In those chairs sat Mira, Dr. Penfield, Greta, and at their center, Halcyon. Dr. Penfield spoke first. His tone was calm, measured, and full of steady weight. For years, this sanctuary has protected species hunted, neglected, or forgotten. Today we welcome a life unlike any we have ever sheltered before. A being, not of rumor, not of myth, but of truth. He leaned back, giving the floor to Mira. She held up one broken chain she had kept as evidence. The serial numbers still burned along the metal links. These chains were used to bind him, she said softly, her words clear and deliberate. He was never a prisoner by choice. He was stolen, caged, and treated as property. But his name is Halcyon, and he is free now. She stepped aside, ended, and the broadcast focused on the young star drake. Halcyon lifted his head, his wings folded close. Light caught the copper glow in his eyes. When his voice entered the minds of those watching, it traveled with a gentleness that surprised even those who feared him most. I was born among stone and stars. I learned songs before I learned silence. For 3 years, silence was forced on me. But now, I speak again. I am not a weapon. I am not an object. I am Halcyon. Across colonies, mining stations, and family domes, people watched in stunned silence. Children leaned forward, captivated. Workers paused their shifts to hear. What came through the feed was not anger, not a roar, but a voice that carried truth, like water carries reflection. The response from the ships orbiting nearby was swift. Official-sounding voices demanded surrender. They sent documents, stamped and signed, claiming purchase and ownership. They called Halcyon an asset, a specimen, a thing. But their words clashed against what thousands had just felt. The broadcast had shown not a beast, but a person. The sanctuary's communication lines overflowed with messages of support. Some were simple. He's alive. He's real. Protect him. Others were longer, filled with outrage that any being could be treated that way. Captain Rao arrived quietly during the second hour of the broadcast. He carried with him a signed report from this squad, a statement declaring that they had witnessed Halcyon act with intelligence and restraint. He handed it to Penfield, who added it to the stream. "These guards were ordered to destroy him," Penfield said. "Instead, they tell the truth. Halcyon is sentient. The law cannot deny it." Outside the sanctuary, families from nearby domes began to gather. They carried what they had: old hazard tape, cloth, rope, and tied it into a long ribbon. Together they stretched it around the outer fence, a living boundary. They did not shout. They did not fight. They simply stood in silence, humming old work songs that had steadied miners for generations. The sound carried low across the ice, a human answer to the voice of a dragon. The shadow ships circled overhead, their weapons still armed. But every moment they waited, more people joined the line. The ribbon grew longer, brighter, until it was impossible to miss. A child on the edge of the crowd pointed upward when Halcyon appeared above the dome, his wings shining in the pale light. The crowd fell quiet, and then they cheered. Inside, Mira placed her hand on Halcyon's scales. "They see you now," she whispered. "And I see them," he replied, his voice steady and filled with new strength. "They are not afraid." Faced with witnesses, broadcasts, and undeniable truth, the ships had no clean path forward. They could not fire without sparking outrage across every colony tuned to the feed. They could not seize Halcyon. One by one, the ships powered down weapons. Navigation lights blinked on, signaling retreat. Mira exhaled in relief. Penfield sat heavily in his chair, his shoulders sagging as though he had just set down a burden carried for decades. Greta laughed once, sharp and bright, then quickly covered her face with her hands. Halcyon lowered his head, his copper eyes soft. Today was a storm, but it was quiet. Not chains, not fire, only voices. Voices can be stronger than steel. The following days transformed the sanctuary. Messages poured in from across the system. Schools asked for recordings of Halcyon's words. Unions pledged protection. Officials in distant colonies argued over laws. But the people had already decided. Halcyon was not a legend anymore. He was a symbol, living proof that compassion was stronger than fear. Mira found herself walking the dome's edge late at night, watching Halcyon rest under the artificial star. "You gave me more than freedom. You gave me choice. And you gave me trust," she answered. "That matters just as much." Days later, the two of them climbed to the highest hatch above the dome. Cold air bit at their faces, but the sky above was clear. Halcyon crouched, and Mira settled between the ridges of his scales, her hands finding their place as if they had always belonged there. With one strong beat of his wings, they rose above the sanctuary, above the gathered crowd, above the ice plains that stretched forever. The wind roared in her ears, but her heart was steady. Halcyon's voice brushed her thoughts one last time. "This is not the end. This is the beginning. We will teach, we will protect, and we will fly." Mira smiled into the rushing air. "Then let's fly." Together they soared across the pale horizon, leaving behind the memory of chains and carrying forward the promise of a brighter sky.